Good evening. Revelation TV brings to you the live late show this evening, and Tim Vince and myself with you for the next 50 odd minutes, God willing. And also we do have our friend Nathan in the control room, who's doing everything except presenting. Tim, I wanted to call this tonight the Ides of March. Beware the Ides of March. And looking up a little bit of the history, what was significant about
Well, it's famous because of the stabbing or assassination of Julius Caesar on the 15th of March. So that is Ides, it's the date when that's happened. And in the Roman calendar, March was the first month of the year. And so December was the 10th month of the year, and quite a lot happened during that month. And but yeah, the Ides of March was when, you know, interestingly, you know, when you compare to the Jewish, you know, Jubilee, you know, it's when debts had to be
cancelled.
Well, met.
Yes, no, I meant the Jubilee was the opposite to what
Jubilee
the Roman
was the debt's cancelled. The Romans, you know, basically, if you're someone who owes a lot of money, beware the Ides of March.
Right, there you go.
'Cause that's when the hammer comes down and the debt collectors and the bailiffs turn up.
And that's when the, if you like, the new budget's going to be announced probably.
Pretty soon.
Yeah?
Pretty soon. And that's when maybe the peace agreement with Putin is going to be sprung.
Never know.
I don't know. It is a weird time of year.
Yeah, well, it was just a feeling. I can't put it down to anything else, and I thought, well, hang on a sec, why should this come to my mind just before we went live tonight? So, well, let's see what unfolds over the coming days, because we're now looking at the 5th of March, so we've got 10 days to get to the Eid.
And you see it approaching, and you think, who's Brutus? Who's going to stab who in the back?
Just about everybody.
It is pretty. I wouldn't trust any of them.
And the saying goes, et tu, Brute?
That's true. Okay. You too, Brute. Yeah. My friend.
Yeah. You were standing with me. Who it could be likened to in today's world?
That is such a good question, Howard. I often, my world is the Christian world. So I do think that there are many who have gone out from us and did not belong to us. And that's a kind of saying that you thought people were on your side, and then you discover, oops, what are they saying publicly, or what are they saying about others behind their back? And so we've all got to, you know, examine ourselves. I still come back to Psalm 139, where David, you know, says, "Oh, that you would slay the wicked," and then after that says, "Lord, search me
and create in me a new heart."
That's it. Search me and see if there be any wicked way in me. And we can all make mistakes. And by the way, to folks watching, I know it's a very divisive issue, Trump, Zelensky, Putin, and we're only seeking to unpack the subject, and people have different views because of the nature. It's a pretty intense thing if you're thinking about your children or grandchildren going to fight against the Russians. You better get it right.
Yes.
That's all I would say.
Well, it's amazing that we should actually get into that already.
Yeah.
But just think about, do we have the manpower in the sense of the will power for our young people that could be conscripted if there is going to be a war or a threat of war, which there is. Therefore, there could be people that are going to be conscripted, but they don't have the will. They don't have not only the ability to fight, but they don't have the will to fight.
Yes.
Because we've got Generation Z who pretty much doesn't want to get involved in anything or, you know, like that.
Yeah, what I would say is our whole culture is in disrepair. Our society is in disrepair. Our ethos is in disrepair. Our morality is in disrepair. Our weaponry, our arsenal is in disrepair. Yeah. And I did a degree in engineering many, many years ago at Loughborough, and one of the first things I learned was the costs of what they called preventative maintenance and breakdown maintenance. And you think, preventative maintenance, you know, I pay every year for NATO and, you know, all of these things. But if you don't keep up, let's say the maintenance on your car engine, it's going to cost a lot more to repair it when it goes bang and the flipping camshaft goes.
Right. We've got new ships that have been launched.
Yeah.
One in particular recently, just a few months ago or a couple of months back, and the thing had to turn around and come back because it was already having engine problems.
7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. So we've had our years of plenty. Think about the free credit for 20 years from the early part of the century.
And what about the free ride that America's given us, because we haven't really stepped up to match our NATO budgets properly.
We haven't repaired the roof when the sun's shining. You know, we're basically pretty well
found wanting.
stuffed. We're naked in a thorn bush. We really are in trouble,
Yeah.
and the king doesn't have any clothes.
But don't tell him.
Unfortunately, pretty well everyone knows it now, and even with these European leaders all sort of strutting the world stage, they don't. If you're Putin and you've got however many 100,000 convicts who you've released to fight on the front line, you're thinking, I don't think so. And what you said about the snowflake generation, is that really going to scare the Russians? They're rough.
They're going to be laughing at us. And in fact, probably that's why, with what's happened last week in particular, and what's happening not only in the White House, but what is happening with Macron making his announcements yesterday, and also what they're proposing to get together. And it's all very palsy-walsy, in a sense, between Europe and the United Kingdom, even though we're not in there anymore. In fact, some of the states, like Spain, don't even want to know the Brits, you know. So, and yet they're, cheekily enough,
they're our allies.
No, but they're paying the least towards NATO, you know, out of all of the.
We're friends like these. Who needs enemies?
Exactly, et tu, Brute.
Yeah, yes, thank you, touche.
Yes. It's funny, we start from nowhere, Tim. We talk about something 2 seconds
and then we come back
before.
to the Bible.
Right.
And then we come back to
and
the
I
Bible.
have the page that fell out of my Bible.
Facsimile.
Because my other Bible is in better repair, but it somehow ended up in my bedside cabinet. So, but I was looking for this scripture, and it got all twisted, and I was looking for it earlier today, and it's spot on. And we're going to read that first, because when you think about what's happening in the world, it's really good to reflect on scripture, as what we do on Revelation TV. So as we look at the scriptures there that are coming up, Tim, and I think I chose it was from Matthew. Just about to read this.
Matthew 11, 24. Nevertheless, I say to you, that it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom on the day of judgment than for you. Was that Tiberius?
Yes. Now, just the background, without going into it too deeply, because the main principle is this could apply to today, okay? So it mentions Chorazin, I think, and other places, you know, which Jesus was saying they didn't have faith, they're ignorant, they're in their wokeism, and they're asleep, they're not awake.
Yeah.
But he was saying here, look, Sodom and Gomorrah, which was totally destroyed because of its disobedience to God and other things. So what are we seeing today is that God actually goes on to explain to us through Scripture. This is obviously written by Matthew as well, but it's recorded in Matthew, what is it, 11?
11,
Yeah. So read the rest of it now in context with what we're talking about.
At that time, Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and intelligent and have revealed them to infants. Yes, Father, for this was well-pleasing in your sight. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, nor does anyone know the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son determines to reveal him. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is comfortable or easy, and my burden is light. It's a wonderful, wonderful verse that you've got literally the build up to that is the Sermon on the Mount, which looks impossible. You know, you have to be perfect. He even says, be ye perfect as I'm perfect, and love your enemies. And all of that is in there. And you think,
I'll never
impossible.
make it. Yeah, right.
And then
I
he
don't
says,
qualify.
You can do it with me.
Yeah. What I get from these scriptures is the fact that as difficult as things are going to be, and don't be overburdened with it, because my yoke is light. But also what he's saying is he makes the wise of this world foolish in his eyes because of what's happening. And the world doesn't know what to make of what happened in the White House last week, okay? And it doesn't know how to deal with the present situation between Ukraine and Putin in Russia. And I know many of you, probably like myself at the beginning of the week, I was sort of like, Trump's lost it, you know, but we were only shown a little bit of what the left is in this world and this country want to be showing and sharing with you. So I've chosen this clip, which I showed this morning, just to highlight how Zelensky, I think now, was very rude, impertinent, belligerent, and discourteous. Have a look at this. It's only a short clip, and tell me what you think. Live at revelationtv.com. Back with you in a minute.
First, I want to show you just how diplomatic I believe President Trump was throughout their Oval Office meeting.
Your soldiers have been unbelievably brave. We've given them great equipment, but somebody has to use the equipment. They've been unbelievably brave, and we give them great credit. This was supposed to be over very quickly, and here we are 3 years later. So I give tremendous credit to your generals and your soldiers and yourself, in the sense that it's been very hard fighting, very tough fighting. They're great fighters, and you have to be very proud of them from that standpoint. But now we want to get it over with. It's enough.
It's enough. That's the part that doesn't look like President Zelensky wanted to hear.
An honor to have you, and please, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you for the invitation. He broken this ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. Yeah, you're playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot of times.
No, in this
even
entire
today,
meeting, you said thank you.
Even today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you
He's
can...
not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning.
I know.
You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about
if you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me.
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3
okay?
days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this, I tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said a lot of times thank you to American people.
Accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on out here. I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the
I'm
cards.
thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
tell you
You're
again,
running low
I
on
know.
soldiers.
Don't- please,
you're running
Mr.
low on
President.
soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And
President.
then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I wanted this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're
I
saying
said,
you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't
it doesn't
with
matter
me.
for you what.
That
what
wasn't
this
with me.
nation- it
That was
wasn't
with
you.
a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person.
But this
That
is
was
your,
with,
this
that was
is
with
your
Obama.
president. It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, the Ukrainian ambassador was actually putting her head in her hands, and we got stills of that because we hadn't got it in that particular clip. So just to show her, you know, there was a couple of times when the camera went on to her, and it was just like, oh no, what's he saying now? But I mean, I don't know about you, but I just think he's out of order. He didn't even let people finish their sentence or anything, and he sort of like came across to me as belligerent, and it's a shame. Maybe he's too weary, war weary, but he had no respect for the
He's tired. He's
president
really
or
trying to argue
vice
his
president.
case. He's really trying so hard, and yet it backfired.
Yeah.
Shall I read a couple of emails?
Yeah,
They come
yeah.
straight in. I
Yeah.
mean, Stefan hasn't written on this yet. We had quite a few coming in on our morning, so it's quite good to hear the different views. But Howard, you need to play the full episode before what was played on newsreels. Zelensky was set up. David Hathaway yesterday threw light on why Trump hates Zelensky. While I prayed for Trump to come in for Israel's sake, putting aside fears of Trump's affinity with Putin. E.g., speaking out against Zelensky and not supporting Ukraine into NATO. Unfortunately, so that's your point. I might read more of yours, Stefan, because that's quite a long one. Debs writes, hope you're feeling better, Howard. Good to see you.
Thank you.
That American idiot who's bothered if you wear a suit did it on purpose. No doubt it's a total setup. You know them by their fruit. And then Chris says, we're being led by hawks into a period of time that we have no control over whatsoever. They are banging the war drums, telling us of the great threat from Russia. We are in more danger from these psychopaths than we are from Russia. And then Adam says, another brilliant program. Here's the thoughts. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not belittling the dreadful destruction and loss of life in the Ukrainian-Russian war, but up until a few weeks ago, the subject was barely even mentioned in our parliament. What's changed then? Trump is seeking to bring about a peace deal to the region. And whatever your opinion about him, everyone would agree that that's a good thing for so many reasons. Meanwhile, back in the UK, you think we're suddenly on a war footing. Our great leader, statesman Starmer, is strutting around the world stage full of his own self-importance, far too busy to bother about domestic matters. A wonderful dead cat on the table opportunity. And there we are. He mentions Kemi Badenoch in the questions.
But
That's from Alan and Judith.
Yeah, I mean, that's
In
the
March,
danger we're at right now. When you're looking at ways in which you could up the ante as far as, saying, well, we're going to stand against Putin, and quite rightly so in respect, but it's all of a sudden that we've taken this stance, and is there... You've got a vying for a top dog as well, between Macron, Starmer. I don't think there's anybody else there that's in the running as far as...
It's the stampede towards war. They're all beating their chests. I'm the king of the castle. But if I could just read a couple of things. This was in yesterday's Telegraph, but when we didn't have it in front of us for our mornings. But Alison Pearson is just saying, look, a country that was serious about defence would not permit the number of young male migrants who broke into the UK to outnumber the men in our military. This one, we can put it up on the screen, but 162 migrants received settled status last year. The total British Army strength last summer was 109,000. And that is broken down. It's broken down. 74,000 regular soldiers, 4,000 Gurkhas, 26,000 volunteers. So, yeah, we've got more migrants coming into the country than we have army soldiers. And so that is quite stark. And then another point that Alison makes, a country that was serious about defence, this is talking about Russian oil now, would find it a bit strange that its allies in Europe spend more on Russian oil and gas than on aid to Ukraine. In 2024, Europe is estimated, it's the next slide, to have bought £22 billion worth of fossil fuels from Russia, while giving only 19 billion to support Kyiv.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just, are we serious, in other words? We're not. And we do not have an army, as I said, that's in a state of repair, and Europe doesn't have it. There was another thing on the BBC website tonight, talking about this great conference that Starmer's had, and they listed what the different countries were offering, and this is quite revealing. So Belgium is going to deliver F-16 fighter jets, maybe half a dozen. The Prime Minister says Croatia has allocated 2% of its budget. Slovenia and Norway have also committed to boosting their defence spending. Lithuania, can you see much substance here? Lithuania says he proposes the 31st of January 2030 as a date for Ukraine to join the EU. Sweden's foreign minister says the country plans to send up to eight, Howard, Gripen fighter jets. It's just Keystone Cops. And Starmer keeps talking about the coalition of the willing. Well, he's just copying Tony Blair's playbook when, by the way, Britain was in a more powerful position with America, who was the world superpower. He's using the same language, but there isn't much in that coalition of the willing.
Yeah, and we've got a pittance that we're offering as far as some earlier versions of the Typhoon fighter jet, which is very good, but still it's not up to today. It's
it was
not
the first model. It's the one that, there was like the experimental model.
Yeah. And so it's not really up to much. And it's only a handful that we're giving as well. So, but all this sort of, filibustering, is that the word?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's bluster. And I actually think that they mean well. They do see, and it's a genuine threat that Putin could be Hitler. Yeah. It's a genuine threat that he takes Ukraine first, like Hitler took the Rhineland, and they did nothing. So they're thinking, well, we don't want to make that mistake again. But if they didn't want to make that mistake again, why wait 3 years, number one, before properly? Because they don't have anything in the cupboard to fight with.
And don't get me wrong, because I know as soon as I open my mouth, there'll be people shouting me down. But in the past, times past, like when Israel was out of order, the Babylonians came in, ransacked Jerusalem, took away captives, and for 70 years they were in bondage, just as was prophesied, and to teach them a lesson as well. Then, of course, at the end of 70 years, along comes Cyrus the Great, and he releases them. They all go back to rebuild Jerusalem and, come back to their land. Is there not a lesson here that the West might be putting itself, as it has, in confrontation, direct confrontation with God, because it doesn't follow? It's so woke. It's so
totally, absolutely.
We're losing our values, and as Valt said at the Munich conference, we've lost our democratic rights between our own little countries, within the EU and the United Kingdom. So, what my point is God allowing Russia to actually win this war against not only just Ukraine, but against the coalition of Europe?
Yeah, I think folks need to, before almost we go through emails, they need to read Isaiah 5, where there are 7 woes, and let's highlight them. I mean, the biggest one is, woe to you who call evil good and good evil. And then it says, I think the 7th was the locusts coming from the east as judgment, and they come swiftly. And it's a biblical,
and that was a
theme.
Famine that it caused as well, did it not?
It's a biblical theme that you bring judgment on yourself when you abandon God.
Absolutely.
And when you allow the Jews to be persecuted like they are on our streets. I mean, the rise of Islamic anti-Semitism across Western Europe is horrific.
Yeah. Do you know, it comes back to that scripture at the beginning that we stated there in chapter 11. I'm just going to say, it says, nevertheless, I say to you that it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment than for you. And this is where I think we could be heading for, is this day of judgment. And we know, we were talking about it, we're having something to eat earlier in the refreshment room, and it's a matter of timing, but also you've got 6,000 years, and we know the 7,000 year period is where we're heading for next. And so we're heading, it is coming around the beginning of the next decade.
Yeah.
It could very well be. I know, is it one of our leaders have actually said they're looking at it being 2032 as the end of the 6,000 year period.
If you calculate it.
Which is significant. Even if we're out a few years, I think even the Jewish calendar is coming close to the end of the 6,000 year period.
You couldn't make it up.
No.
The 7 days, 6 days of creation, and as it were, the 6,000 years of human history is amazing. How we've mentioned, let's say, Christians are being oppressed in Britain, but so are the Jews. And we've got, I think you found this a trailer for a film called something called The Tragedy.
Yes.
The Tragic Awakening.
Yes.
I think this is part of the story. It's part of the story with Russia as well. It's happening around us.
Yes, but in this trailer you'll see really highlights the goodness, if you like, of Israel, because they get the bad news, and they're ill-treated and they're wrongfully blamed for things. So they've made mistakes. There's no doubt about that. But God has a plan for them to survive and to win at the end of the day. But let's have a look at this little trailer. It's quite eye-opening.
I grew up in Lebanon, and I hated the Jews. I was told that the Jews are evil, that they hate everybody, and they would do anything to achieve their goals.
Disemboweled humans and raped women paraded around the streets while thousands cheer. Nothing has prepared any of us for this.
I'd never imagined seeing what we've witnessed after October 7th.
This was the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust.
We must normalize massacres as the status quo.
There are people openly celebrating mass murder.
History has made that day. Very proud of my people. Very, very proud.
They are not cheering for the liberation of the Palestinian people in Gaza. They are screaming, "Gas the Jews."
I would love it if they would do it again and again and again.
I don't understand anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism is not just a normal bigotry.
Where does this come from?
Why are the Jews always hated?
What's unique about anti-Semitism is that it is incredibly universal. It has longevity like no other hatred. And the intensity.
I found myself on a quest to try and understand anti-Semitism. The Jews are blamed for all ills of the world. Why?
Anti-Semitism requires a different type of explanation. When you see it so stark, you ask the question, so what is it?
On October 7th, the world was forced to make a choice.
When a society starts to indulge in this lurid, paranoid fantasy, every other hatred comes next.
You think it's an accident that Iran, North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, they hate Israel?
Every person has to choose a side.
Hitler somehow figured it out.
The rabbis of the Talmud and Adolf Hitler actually agree on the root cause of anti-Semitism.
So Hitler didn't want to kill the Jews because they were bad. He wanted to kill them because they were good.
Such a powerful documentary, tragic awakening, which is what we here on Rev TV are trying to do every time we do a program. We're saying, wake up, because it's happening. It's not just smell the coffee, you know, smell the cordite. It's happening, and it is. It has to be said. It's come hand in glove with Islamic and Islamist anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. You know, the Islamic revolution in Iran. It's spread, and now we have them all on our streets across Europe. It's unbelievable how that's been done.
And just to reiterate what we saw or mentioned a few weeks ago, that the supporters of Hamas's October the 7th, 2023, invasion and into the kibbutz, into those non-combatants, was going to be celebrated on our streets here in London. Yeah. They tried to get permission at that very time that was going on. So there was obviously collaboration, and people were aware, and the whole idea is to, if you like, get the sympathy for Hamas and the Palestinians, even though what they did was absolutely, you know, so cruel and disastrously, you know, sort of inhumane. Yeah. You don't shoot an Israeli woman or baby or kill them, you know, just because, you know, they had a feud or have some issues of the past. You know, what they did that day was inhumane, and it started
celebrating
a war.
how it
and
is.
They were
So
celebrating, yes.
So it's not just, you know, let's say women in hijabs who are supporting it, or sort of bearded radicals. There's a girl there who's all dolled up, you know, on social media saying, let's do it again and again. There's a whole left-wing subculture that's bought into it. So young people are taking it on board, and Jeremy Bowen and the media have a lot to answer for, because they've popularized this hatred of the Jews. Now, Donald Trump, who everyone rails against, is known for the Abraham Accords, is known for out and out support for Israel, and he met with the some of the hostages in the Oval Office. This isn't reported much, is it?
Not really at all.
After he saw these 7, I think there were 7 survivors of that terrible pogrom, he gave this statement on Hamas, and we'll read it out. Shalom Hamas means hello and goodbye. You can choose. Release all of the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over for you. Only sick and twisted people keep bodies, and you are sick and twisted. I'm sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job. Not a single Hamas member will be safe if you don't do as I say. I have just met with your former hostages whose lives you have destroyed. This is your last warning for leadership. For the leadership, now is the time to leave Gaza while you still have the chance. Also, to the people of Gaza, a beautiful future awaits, but not if you hold hostages. That's the same Donald Trump. Yeah. That everyone thinks, oh, he's just a bully. Well, you need a bully in this world today. You need it.
Well, somebody who's strong of character, that's for sure. And something's happened to Donald Trump. You know, we know him in the past. He was just really a very shrewd businessman and quite unethical. And he did live a life that was, you know, fornication. You know, but it seems that God touched him, and he believes that when he survived that bullet that was meant to kill him was actually from God in protecting him. And if, like a Cyrus, who was moved to restore the nation of Israel.
He was a tyrant and a dictator. God used him.
Yeah, exactly. And could he not be a modern day Cyrus in that sense? He's no saint for sure, but he wants to help establish the truth about Israel, but also he wants to support them against the likes of Hamas, Hezbollah, and also Iran. If you only knew what Iran and these people would do, not only to the Jews and not only to the Christians, but to every non-Islamic person who, you know, you are the meat that they will eat to destroy. In that sense, you will be stripped of everything that is anything decent about you and your lives.
Howard, the most difficult job in Christian television is to read the emails on the Late Show, because there's just so many coming through. I mean, Satinder says, the Trump and Vance attack was totally disrespectful and uncalled for, in my humble opinion. Trump evidently is not a man of integrity, as he called Zelensky a dictator and then subsequently retracted the statement. Trump bangs on about the ocean that separates the US and Russia. However, has he forgotten that Russia has ICBMs and that can cover the ocean in minutes, even quicker if they're submarine launched? Trump and his lapdog need a lesson in manners. Well, I would say, Satinder, be careful on that, because America's arsenal and equipment is pretty awesome.
None, really.
Pretty awesome.
And he's very confident that he would actually defend America. And he's going to be setting up as well the same as what the Iron Dome is in it for Israel. And I believe it's going to be needed, sadly.
Yeah. It's quite funny that he calls it the Golden Dome, though.
Right.
Because, you know, we often talk about the Golden Dome in Jerusalem. But Lynn says, I had a friend visiting this afternoon and we both wondered what exactly would we be fighting to defend when through the action of very force our nation and culture is now in disarray. By the way, can I suggest, Howard, that you try Manuka honey?
Yes, that's a good one. Thank you.
Highly rated, very expensive.
Very good, yes. I used to take that. I've just lost, I'm just so busy with doing the things we're doing. I'm not really looking after myself very well, but that's at my expense, unfortunately. But Manuka honey, good one. What was also in the news today, if we could find that article, it'd be great, was when we look at the people that are going to stand before the courts because they've got for a misdemeanor or something they've said or they stand for, they could be you know, circumstances that would be taken into account because they perhaps come from an ethnic group or they are, let's say, Muslims, for example.
They get preferential treatment.
Yes, but if you're a Christian, you don't get it. Isn't that incredible? They've actually highlighted the fact if you're coming from a Christian background, there's no sympathies for you too. You will get the full weight of the law. How can that be justice?
Unbelievable. Shall I have a crack at doing a bulk, a block?
Yeah.
When Tim mentioned that the reason for the saying "beware the Ides of March" is because Julius Caesar was assassinated on the 15th of the 3rd month, or 153. This made me think of today's internet and the 153 great fishes that Jesus caused Peter to catch. This is from Brian. But Brian, in the Roman calendar, it wasn't the 3rd month, it was the 1st month. That's the point that I made. But anyway, and Brian goes on one of his sort of connecting all the dots. And as there are 10 commandments depicting sin, which Jesus had already paid for, the 153 great fishes could depict the children of the Nephilim, whose children became great men of the world, just as Julius Caesar. Jesus told his disciples that he would make them fishers of men, i.e. their souls. All I can say, Brian, is I'm looking forward for all eternity of linking all of these wonderful emails and trying to fathom them.
Yeah,
but it is interesting. And I do think there are layers and layers and layers in the Bible and in the numbers of the Bible that we just can't imagine. Eddie writes, Donald Trump kept praising the bravery of the Ukrainian soldiers. What would a draft dodger like Trump know? What would a draft dodger like Trump know about combat bravery? Howard, I always thought of you as a decent man, but my opinion is reversed with what you have just said. The program last night with Tim and David was a fair reflection, and Zelensky was ambushed. Trump is a bully, and we have no idea as to what is to come. I mean, we're not saying he isn't. We're just saying this is what's happening. You are not taking a Christian point of view. Well, now we know that you're not taking a Christian view on this point and being impartial. Shame on you. Alan, the atheist from a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
so
right,
that's quite interesting.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, Alan.
No, thanks for tuning in, Alan.
Yeah.
On Monday, I actually said I was disgusted with what I saw Trump do, but I wasn't shown the whole of that interview. And that's why I wanted to look at it for myself. And Zelensky was so rude, and he wound up Trump and Vance.
Yeah. So Marilyn says they were going okay till Vance stuck his oar in. They were supposed to be discussing war and peace, not negotiating a deal on a car sale. Trump and Vance ganged up on Zelensky. They interrupted him as much as he did them.
It's the other way around. I mean, it all depends on what's in your head at the time, but that's okay. It's good to have a discussion. At least we're not going to fall out.
No, I think it's really good to have a robust discussion, but probably not in front of the media. And I think that what we showed revealed that Trump was doing it like he always does. If you would like to say a few words, and then we'll go to the other room, we'll give a press conference later. But somehow Zelensky, I think in his tiredness, got the wrong signals from Vance, and then that just set light to the whole thing.
Let me also just make a little thing there. You know, well, what was the guy's name?
Well, there's a few people, but Marilyn,
the atheist
in Wales, Alan.
Alan, when you watch what's going on in the news, do you weep? Do you cry? Does you shed a tear? I do nearly every day, okay? And it's not because I'm voting for anyone in particular. I want the truth. I want to see the whole thing. And I watched Not This Land, I think it was called, the one that was on Channel 4 the other night, and it was on very late.
No. Whose Land?
Whose Land? No,
What's it called? No Other Land.
No Other Land.
Yeah, and that was a good piece of propaganda. I mean, just look at the bulldozer in the background.
But I actually felt really sorry for those who were there and the way in which they were treated.
I know.
And so
all I would say is propaganda is very effective. I didn't see it, so you're ahead of me on that.
Yeah.
But the point is, Hitler managed to hoodwink the whole German population into thinking that the Jews were vermin.
Yeah.
No, they were subhuman vermin, and you can do it.
But what I'm saying is we're only human, and our emotions can get the better of us and everything else. But if we're being fed propaganda, and that's where discernment really comes in. And I would just say to Alan and people who think that I'm, on another planet right now, actually, I do care, and I care for people who suffer. Even the wicked, God says, I do not take delight in the death of the wicked, even though they deserve it, and I take you to be responsible, that's us as Christians or Jews, to help the people to understand the laws of God. And for me, that's all I've done for most of my life, is spent doing this,
Pulse of
Not
Israel.
for the money, that's for sure.
How about, do you want a bit of Abby?
Yes.
Abby Abelow.
Abby
Abelow.
Shall we have a bit of Abby Abelow? Because this is a piece that Abby's done, again, using one of the hostages in particular, who chose to have faith, to demonstrate her faith to her captives as well. Have a look at this.
Another few of our hostages were released today from Gaza, and another despicable public relations show was put on by our Islamo-Nazi enemies in Gaza, highlighting once again the ongoing mistreatment and terror they put our hostages through, even as they're being released. They have them ascend a stage where masked, armed Hamas terrorists carry out a propaganda photo op, forcing them to stand before the cameras before being and wave before being paraded through a tightly packed screaming mob. Then finally they are shoved into a Red Cross vehicle for transfer to Israel. But Israel did not stay silent in the face of this recurring maltreatment and humiliation of our released hostages, right? We know they're doing horrific things while they're in captivity, even though we can't see. But these scenes, they did now for the third time when they release our hostages, celebrating and humiliating us and scaring them to death even while they're being released. The state of Israel retaliated for the maltreatment of its hostages, pausing the release of 100 terrorist prisoners, including 33 serving life sentences. And that's the absolute minimum Israel should be doing, trying to ensure that this spectacle when releasing our hostages finally never happens again for the future releases of those that remain to be released. While it is despicable to think about our enemies celebrating again, thinking they humiliated us, thinking they beat us in this war, with Israel being pressured into this extortion ceasefire deal that forced us to release thousands of barbaric terrorists and to take our forces, our IDF forces, out of Gaza, stick with me because it's time to shift our focus. Take a look at the videos like this coming out of Gaza right now. Look at these Gazans, who after returning to their homes in the north of Gaza, are telling the reporter that their lives are ruined. They have nothing to return to. They saw that their homes are destroyed. There is no water in their community anymore. There is no electricity. That they have no future in the north of Gaza, so they are turning back to southern Gaza, begging for the border with Egypt to be opened so they can leave. They are internalizing on their own that their future is out of Gaza. And make no mistake, that day will come, and hopefully sooner than we realize, including all of the Hamas Islamo-Nazi terrorists, not just the non-combatants who are also Hamas. One day it will be that they will be relocated out of Gaza, as Trump is beginning to speak about and try to put into action. The day will come and Israel will have total control over our ancestral homeland of Gaza, and we will achieve complete victory in this war. Now I want to tell you about Agam Berger, one of the heroic IDF spotters who was released today. While in captivity, it has been told that Agam kept the Sabbath. She refused to eat non-kosher meats and other foods as best as possible. She was an inspiration to her fellow female captives, keeping their spirits high and even braiding their hair to also help keep their spirits high while in captivity. And then after 482 days in Hamas captivity in Gaza, after surviving the horrors of October 7th, the invasion, the massacre, the mass rapings, the kidnapping, the captivity that she was in, she wrote something incredible. On the helicopter back to Israel, with her parents by her side, she picked up a marker and wrote this sign. After everything she went through, she didn't write about revenge, which we deserve and we're going to go after. She didn't write about hate. She didn't write about despair. She wrote, and I'm translating it to English, quote, "I chose a path of faith. I returned in a path of faith. Thank you to all the Jewish people and our heroic IDF soldiers. There is nobody in the world like you," end quote. With that one little sign, after being freed from 482 days of horrendous, evil captivity by Hamas in Gaza, Agam is reminding us about the power of the Jewish people. That is why, despite everything, I'm not worried. Total victory is coming to the Jewish people over our Islamo-Nazi enemies and their allies around the world. We have overcome our enemies for over 2,000 years, and we will overcome them again today. This war does not end until Hamas and every last Islamo-Nazi enemy in our midst is gone and neutered and unable to terrorize us. This war does not end until Israel remains in Gaza forever. This war does not end until Israeli sovereignty is applied in Judea and Samaria. And it does not end until the fake narrative of a so-called Palestinian people and a so-called Palestinian state are thrown into the dustbin of history where they belong. This is not a question of if that will all happen. It's only a question of when that will all happen. So keep your heads up high. Stay strong with faith in God above, and with us standing up for truth, justice, morality, the Jewish people and the Jewish state of Israel on the side of good, on the front line, fighting evil for the whole freedom-loving world, spreading this information, sharing it with everybody. We got this. Am Yisrael Chai. That's it for another episode of Pulse of Israel here in our eternal and ancestral homeland, the land of Israel, and our beautiful, biblical, and indivisible capital, Jerusalem, since King David's time. PulseofIsrael.com. Shalom, everyone, and thanks for watching.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land.
Well, if only I could speak as fast as Abby. Here we go. Norma, I wasn't surprised at what happened. I watch independent news. I also see bits of MSM. When I saw Zelensky's behaviour, I was shocked. It was disgraceful. He came in wearing battle fatigues for a start. I had never seen a leader behave so badly, especially to someone who wants to help his country. The talks and arrangements had all happened beforehand. These were just publicity shots. Zelensky had seen the Democrats 2 hours beforehand, and that is how they told him to behave, to make Trump look bad. Paul and Ruth, an army of a small number will subdue an army of millions. Starmer may be an atheist, but that is not the view of the whole country or Europe for that matter. God perceives the hearts. And I think the point you're making is if God is on our side. When I first saw, this is now Howard in Milton Keynes, when I first saw that meeting with Trump and Zelensky on that day, I thought both Trump and Zelensky were disrespectful to both and unprofessional, acting like children in a playground. And then J.D. Vance getting his 2 pennies worth in as well. If I was Zelensky, I would have just said, can we hold this in a private room rather than the world's media looking on, as it was all a setup, if I'm honest. I'm something embarrassed. Zelensky, Trump should know better. I hope he doesn't do it in front of our king. Thanks for your great program. Jean, in light of this is the subject of the week, isn't it? In the light of the Trump and Zelensky interview and what Israel is going through everywhere is in chaos. Everywhere seems pretty set up for a coming leader to pronounce peace and everyone to think, what a great man. But of course, he will be the complete opposite of peace. As David Hathaway said yesterday evening, Europe is the new Babylon. A brilliant programming, Jean. That was Jean. This is Dean. Please, can you pray against abortion and assisted suicide in Britain and around the world? We're always praying for that. Thank you for that, Dean. Starmer is a warmonger. This is anonymous and full of himself, organising an emergency meeting with European leaders on Sunday, which then led to another emergency meeting with Europe and even President Trudeau. And Europe suddenly finds billions of euros to help Starmer put British boots on the ground, which no one in the country wants to enlist for. Unlike past wars, Starmer unlike past wars. Starmer introduced Trump and Zelensky to King Charles, who attended Muslim services in a Christian church. The country is on a very downward spiral.
Yeah. Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. Keep going?
Yeah.
I'm
gonna
near through it.
Yeah.
It was a journalist who asked Zelensky about his not wearing a suit, not President Trump. Also, President Trump was apparently complimentary to Zelensky on his arrival. That is how it can be twisted. People need to watch the whole 44 minutes. That's from Lynn. A good show as always. This is from Stavina. Praying you will be mainstream. You are needed. Anti-Semitism is a cancer which needs to be cut out. The word is so clear. There is a covenant with the Lord and the Jews, and his justice will prevail. Amen. For thus says the Lord of hosts, he sent me after glory to the nations which plunder you, for he touches you. For he who touches you touches the apple of his eye. Yes. For surely I will shake my hand against them, and they shall become spoil for their servants. Then you will know that the Lord of hosts has sent me. John Watson says, unfortunately, the church in general is taught there is going to be a last great revival and then the rapture. They are not taught things are not going to get better and that we are in the Western church, that we in the Western church won't suffer. Let's get real and proclaim the gospel so that those who believe don't melt when the enemy turns up the heat.
And that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Read on.
Eileen, I can't help thinking about Matthew 24 when Jesus tells us quite plainly about wars and rumours of wars and lawless days, which he said are just the birth pangs relating to the time of his return. I think this country is under God's judgment, allowing all these immigrants into the country, and no one has any idea what to do to stop this. We are in a mess, and without sound leadership, God help us. Yes, you need a bully against unrighteousness, Mr. M says. D says, it's so refreshing to hear you two supporting Trump. I really wish Christians would wake up to what's going on and stop being deceived. Zelensky and Starmer are evil. And then Deborah, why are there no marches in London about Putin occupying land that isn't Russian? Well, that's debatable. I like President Trump for his unshaken stance on some things, and a bit of aggression is needed to shake things up. Not too sure about some of his team, especially Suit Guy. Hooray for Robert Kennedy. Old saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Howard, we've got about 20 seconds. How about a vintage Howard closing?
Oh my goodness. Well, I would always just point you to the Word of God, because there's nothing greater to get an understanding of what the future holds. The biblical view of our future is something that we need to hang on to, and we need to not be afraid, as the scripture was saying earlier, and follow the Lord's lead and share the gospel with others.